Hello, and welcome to your first session in the STEM.LD Orientation Learning Series. In this session, we will learn more about TNTP's report, The Opportunity Myth, and how you can use this research to help you reach your STEM learning goals for your classroom and school community. This training series will lay the foundation for a successful STEM.LD experience. All teachers and leaders will attend this session, Session 1, What is the Opportunity Myth? From there, we'll break out by content area. So math teachers, you will participate in math sessions 2 and 3. Science teachers, you will participate in science sessions 2 and 3. And CTE teachers, you will participate in CTE sessions 2 and 3. Leaders, which include principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, and any district staff, will attend the sessions that most closely align to the teachers they support. You can expect to spend approximately 1 hour on each of these sessions. In that hour, you will watch the session videos, as well as engage in some practice using various tools that we introduce throughout the sessions. All sessions will be asynchronous, and there will be opportunities for you to engage with the content. Throughout all the STEM.LD orientation sessions, you will see these 3 symbols on this screen to signal engagement opportunities throughout the sessions. When you see the orange symbol, you will want to open the STEM.LD resource folder. When you see the blue symbol, you will want to pause the video for reflection. And when you see the green symbol, you will pause the video and engage in some practice. At the very end of each session, there will be a short survey that will capture your attendance for the session. So here's what you can expect in our session today. We went over the expectations of the training series. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to dive into the opportunity myth, what it is, and how you can use this at your school. So my name is Krista Beebe, and I am a director with TNTP. I have over 20 years of experience in education where I've served as a teacher, instructional coach, administrator, and math curriculum director for a school district in Texas. My work over the last several years has focused on supporting math teachers and leaders in creating classrooms where kids are doing the thinking and engaging in meaningful tasks. My passion is around making math accessible for all kids and bringing wonder and excitement into math classrooms. I'm very excited to be starting this journey with you. So let's go ahead and dive into the opportunity myth. The goal of this session is to give you a brief overview of what the opportunity myth is and to make some connections between the 4 key resources identified in this study to the work that we will do in STEM.LD. This is the foundational course for all of the learning we will do this summer. The opportunity myth gives us a window into students' experiences at school and what needs to change so they will be prepared to reach their goals. As we dive into the findings, think about your school and your students. Where are your areas of strength as a school system, and where can you grow? Through STEM.LD, we want all students to have the knowledge, skills, and experiences to successfully pursue a STEM career. We're talking about changing lives by changing trajectories, and this is tough work. So let's dive into the opportunity myth, being open to learn from its findings and start to build this strong STEM community in Tennessee. In September 2018, TNTP published its 6th national report. This report was centered on the student experience. So think like, what are kids doing every day in classrooms? Are they interested in their work? Do they feel challenged? We combined several thousands of hours of observations, student work samples, student and teacher interviews, and student and teacher surveys. And we took all of that information and data, and that's turned into this report that is called the Opportunity Myth. This report came into existence because of a nationwide problem. Students are getting A's and B's in their classes in high school, and then going on to college where they're not prepared. In fact, 40% of all students have to take a remedial class in college, which they have to pay for, and it doesn't count as credit. So we knew that schools weren't consistently preparing students to reach their goals, and we wanted to understand why. We set out to work with 5 districts, 3 urban, 1 rural, and 1 CMO, to follow almost 4,000 students and their teachers across the 2016-2017 school year. We gathered a significant amount of data to paint a picture of what students were experiencing, studying 4 specific components of students' experiences that we hypothesized would correlate with academic success. In each district, we partnered with K-12 teachers who selected 2 of their classes for us to study. In those classes, we gathered almost 5,000 student assignments and more than 20,000 pieces of work on those assignments to measure the quality of the assignments that kids were receiving. We also conducted more than 1,000 hours of full-length observations to determine whether students had access to strong, standards-aligned instruction that made key instructional shifts. We studied student engagement by conducting almost 30,000 in-the-moment student surveys to determine how kids perceive their daily experiences in class. Finally, we collected a teacher survey from every teacher in our study to measure teacher expectations for their students. In addition to this, we collected a significant amount of other type of data. We had access to students' grades and achievement scores, the courses they took, and a wealth of policy information from interviews with teachers, school leaders, and district staff. Our goal was to tell a compelling story that helps people understand what students are experiencing in school every day, and ultimately to make recommendations to improve those experiences at scale. So what did we find? Well, we found that students have clear goals and are generally doing what they are asked in school. In spite of the fact that kids are doing what they're asked, they aren't ready to succeed after school because they spend most of their time in school without access to grade-appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement, and teachers with high expectations. This is true for all students, but students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are even less likely to get those resources than their white and more affluent peers. Finally, we saw that when kids have access to those 4 resources, we'll see improvements in student achievement, especially for students who started the year performing below grade level. As we explore the findings from the opportunity myth, think about the findings and recommendations through the lens of STEM instruction at your school. How can we use these findings to improve STEM instruction and STEM career pathways for our students? We really put students at the center of this study. In our study, over 95% of students wanted to go to college, and over 70% of high schoolers have a concrete career goal that requires they get a 4-year degree. We heard from students and saw evidence that they expect school will set them up to reach their goals if they do what we ask of them. We saw that kids are consistently doing what we ask. So they're on task. When we surveyed kids, students, they told us that they were working on the task that they should be working on 88% of the time. They also complete their assignments successfully. When we looked at all those samples of student work, we basically graded the sample asking ourselves, did students successfully do what the assignment asked them to do? When we said yes, if the students scored at least an 80% on the assignments. So they were successfully doing what their assignment asked of them 71% of the time. They are also getting good grades, which means they're being explicitly told that they're doing what we've asked. So if students are successful on assignments and getting good grades, then why aren't they prepared? We decided to take a deeper look and we graded the assignments again. On those exact same assignments, when we asked ourselves if students met the demands of the standards, we were only able to say yes 17% of the time. That 54 percentage point gap is full of assignments that do not give kids a chance to meet the demands of the standards. That means kids are getting good grades and succeeding on content that is not building the ladder to college success for them. These findings together add up to the opportunity myth, the false promise that we as a society make to students and their families about school. We consistently tell students that if they do what we ask them to do in school, they'll be set up for success in life. But our research showed that we misled students and their families about what they're getting in school. And for many students, even though they do what they are asked, they aren't set up to reach the goals they've set for themselves. Now, these findings are on all of us in the education community, not just teachers. We're all responsible for providing students with better school experiences that set them up for success. In fact, we saw that students have a lot of trust in their teachers. 93% of students we surveyed said it's important to their teachers that they learn a lot. This matches what we saw in our study: teachers working hard and doing what they've been trained to do. We're going to spend the rest of our time together honing in on our findings with the 4 key resources. Before we do that, it's important to note that our study only looked at the point of impact for students, which of course is the classroom experience they have day in and day out. It could be easy, therefore, to misinterpret these findings and walk away thinking that all of the problems in our education system begin and end at the classroom level, and that teachers are the issue. This would be a significant misinterpretation of what we found. Teachers have some autonomy over what happens in their classrooms, but they also exist in schools, systems, and environments that can either set them and their students up for success or failure. As we'll see when we begin to talk about solutions, those schools and classrooms that provided students with better experiences and access to the resources weren't staffed with teachers who were somehow smarter or harder working than everyone else. They were simply in schools with better support systems in place to help teachers and students be successful. Environment matters a lot. So we hypothesized and found that 4 key resources influence the outcome that students achieve in the school year. The first one is grade level assignments. So these are assignments that give students a chance to meet the demands of the standards. The second is strong instruction, which is instruction that asks students to do the majority of the thinking about grade level content. The third is deep engagement, which involves students sharing that they found what they were working on in class interesting and enjoyable, and they were concentrating deeply on it. And the fourth is teachers with high expectations, which involved teachers who reported that they believed their individual students could meet the demands of rigorous standards and do grade level work. In our study, we found that most kids don't get regular access to even one of these 4 resources. And this was especially true for students of color, those from low-income backgrounds, ELL students, and students with IEPs. These 4 resources made a difference for all students in our sample. Students grew more when they had access to these 4 resources. This was especially true for students who were below grade level. Students who started the year behind grew significantly more when they had access to grade-appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement, and teachers with high expectations. This flies in the face of an implicit narrative we sometimes tell ourselves about students who are behind, which is that they can't do grade level work. It also challenges the notion that students who are behind need less challenging work in order to meet them where they are. Since what we see here is that if students who are behind don't have access to grade-appropriate assignments, they never have the chance to catch up. Instead, teachers need stronger support and training to give students real access to challenging content, regardless of their starting point. That's incredibly difficult but vital, and it should not rest on teachers' shoulders alone. Throughout this session, consider your own school and classroom. What questions come up for you about how these findings play out in your school system? What systems, supports, and structures need to be in place to address those things? Would you answer these questions differently if you were thinking only of your school's STEM program? Pause the video here and read through the questions on the slide. Think about your classroom and your school. Jot down some reflections for each question. You can refer to these reflections throughout today's session and use them to start conversations at your campus. So take about 5 to 10 minutes and pause the video to reflect. So the great news is that we know that by giving kids access to these 4 resources, we can greatly change the trajectory for students. We're going to take a look at each of the 4 resources with examples from our study. Let's start with grade-appropriate assignments. We observed many classrooms, and we noticed that students in the same grade level at the same district may have vastly different experiences. Let's use this example to explore what we found. So let's imagine that you walk into this 6th grade classroom, and this is the assignment that you see kids working on. On this assignment, students had the opportunity to develop both procedural fluency and conceptual understanding because they were asked to calculate the mean and median of a data set based on a real-world scenario, and then asked to reflect on the relationship between those measures and the shape of overall distribution. This assignment allows students to meet the depth of the standard while engaging in mathematical practices in a meaningful way. So let's say now that you go to another 6th grade classroom in the same district, and you notice that these kids are having a very different experience. Students were working on this worksheet, and they were given a set of numbers with no context, asked to calculate the minimum, maximum, and quartiles, and directed to make box and whisker plots. Students are not given the opportunity to work with real-world data or visualizations other than box and whisker plots, nor are they asked to consider if one type of data visualization may be more appropriate than another. 2 groups of students, the same age, in the same district, getting assignments of vastly different quality. How can that happen? This wasn't an anomaly, and we think the likely root cause is the fact that many teachers do not have access to high-quality materials, are given so little training on the new math standards, the shifts in math education, and deeply understanding how their standards connect to the grades above them and below them. So as we shared, we didn't often see students engaged in content that was aligned with grade level standards, but we didn't hypothesize that content was the only thing that mattered. We also thought about how students were engaged in that content. So we used observations to gather information about instruction. We consistently saw in our full-length observations that students rarely experienced rigorous instructional practices or had a chance to do the deep thinking in the lesson, even in cases where content was on grade level. Of the 899 observations we conducted in core classes, only 295 offered students the chance to engage in grade level content. And only 74 of those asked students to do the thinking about that grade level content. So let's go back to our example of a strong assignment. Let's say that while we were visiting this 6th grade classroom, we noticed that while the assignment is high quality, the teacher is showing students step by step how to answer each of these questions on the board, and kids are simply copying it in their notebooks. The students are not required to do any of the thinking. This would not qualify as strong instruction. Grade-appropriate assignments and strong instruction make a big difference in student learning. Let's take a look at the impact that deep engagement has. As I shared earlier, we gave students in-the-moment student surveys to ask them about the experiences they're having in class when they are taking the survey. We heard consistently from students that their experiences weren't all that engaging or worthwhile. This was especially true for middle and high school students. We saw a consistent drop in engagement and perceived worth from 3rd to 12th grade. This doesn't mean that every lesson needs to be full of Pinterest-worthy activities. Rather, deep engagement happens when kids understand the relevance of what they are learning and they are challenged to do deep and meaningful thinking. And finally, we found that teachers with high expectations were a resource that really matters. We surveyed teachers to gauge their knowledge of the standards, their support for the standards, and their expectations for students' success. We found that teachers mostly supported the content of the standards, but oftentimes those same teachers did not believe that their particular students could be successful against the demands of rigorous standards. In this, we see a technical cry for help. Many of the teachers in our study are legitimately teaching students who are behind, and we heard consistently, "I don't know how to support my students who are behind in reaching the demands of grade level standards." The low expectations that we uncovered also seem to contribute to a mismatch between the grades students receive and how prepared they are to demonstrate the skills they need to reach the goals they've set for themselves, which consistently included college. Across every assessment that we looked at, state level assessments, the ACT, the SAT, and the AP exams, students got signals through their grades that they were learning what they needed to, but did not demonstrate that they were prepared for what came next via their performance on these assessments. For example, 80% of the students who got Bs, or for that matter, 50% of the students who got As in their AP classes did not pass the AP assessment and earn college credit, even though their grades had communicated to them that they were on track. So overall, the hard truth is that most students are missing out on these key resources. But some students are still getting more than others. That access is not random, nor is it distributed equitably. In our sample, students of color and low-income students were systematically denied access to grade-appropriate assignments or instruction. This was true even when we controlled for achievement. We saw that students from low-income backgrounds still received lower quality assignments even when they started at the same performance level as their higher income peers. The exciting news is we can fix this. As we shared earlier, we know what the 4 resources are and that they matter. We also know that students who get access to the resources consistently If they get access consistently, they can close gaps with their peers if they received year-over-year access to, for example, grade-appropriate assignments. This means that the achievement gap isn't actually inevitable. It's just baked into a system where we give some students lower quality daily experiences than others. So what would it take to make the opportunities of school more than a myth? What would it take to make the promises we make to students that if they come to school and do what we ask, that they'll be set up to reach their goals? What would it take to make that a reality? As we begin to think about solutions, it's worth calling out those classrooms and schools we saw in the study that were bright spots in terms of providing all students with greater access to the 4 resources and ensuring that students had higher quality experiences. These schools and classrooms tended to share a few important traits that can be instructive for us as we think about what it takes to improve student experiences at scale. The bright spot classrooms we saw consistently offered students access to grade-appropriate assignments and strong instruction. Students were deeply engaged and were members of a safe, respectful learning environment. They were led by teachers who fundamentally believed and communicated to students that they could be successful against rigorous demands. Sometimes such classrooms were operated by amazing individual teachers who, despite being surrounded by low expectations, consistently held high standards. But more often than not, these teachers were operating within schools that supported their teachers to reach these heights. And these bright spot schools all seem to share a few common traits. First, they all seem to focus intently and consistently on small, clear set of instructional priorities that were aligned to a high bar for student success. That alone can be a big accomplishment when so many schools seem to roll out new priorities every few weeks. But our most successful schools didn't stop there. They coupled their clear vision of excellent instruction and student success with strategic, consistent support and development for teachers aligned to that vision. For example, a few of our most successful schools shared a vision of excellent instruction grounded in putting grade-level content in front of all students and expecting students to do most of the work and thinking in the classroom. And they then strategically supported their teachers to meet that vision by having administrators frequently in classrooms in entirely non-evaluative roles simply to offer teachers coaching and support to reach the vision that the school had set. Or they provided teachers with frequent opportunities to meet and really think deeply about what their instructional materials and standards were asking of students, where students were likely to get hung up, and how teachers would address those potential hang-ups without watering down the rigor called for by the standards and the instructional materials. By studying the commonalities of these sorts of bright spot schools, we can learn lots about what we should be focusing on to improve student experiences at scale. So as we wrap up this session, let's return to our reflection questions. Take a moment to briefly reflect on the individual answers that you came up with for these questions. I'm also going to ask you to pause the video here, and as you reflect on your questions, see if once you use what you've learned in this session, is there anything that you want to revise now? Also, consider which of these 4 resources do you think is having the biggest impact on STEM education at your school? And what are some of the challenges you face in implementing them? So pause here, take about 5 to 10 minutes, jot down some reflections that you would like to share with your campus. This concludes session 1. As a reminder, math teachers, you will look for Math Session 2 next. Science teachers, you will look for Science Session 2. CTE teachers, you will look for CTE Session 2. And leaders, you can choose to go to the Session 2 that most closely aligns to the teachers that you support. At the end of each session, there will be an attendance survey. This survey will give you an email to verify your attendance and your participation in this session. So please take a minute to fill out the brief survey so we can capture your participation and send your confirmation email. Thank you so much for your participation today. My email is on the screen. If you have any wonderings, questions, comments that you would like to share about what you learned today, please feel free to reach me at krista.beebe@tntp.org. Thank you.